Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the GAIS Spotlight, our 11th episode. Today we have Dr. Jelili from Al-Falah Education Design, Evaluation and Research Center, AFEDERC. Dr. Jelili is an interdisciplinary scholar and practitioner, a strategic planner who draws on Islamic epistemology, systems thinking, backcasting, visioning, and participatory approaches to model and develop strategic plans. He uses to inform policy formulation and advance solutions to messy and complex educational and sustainability problems. Dr. Jelili is an alumni of the International Islamic University of Malaysia and is currently the Associate Director of the Al-Falah Education Design Evaluation Research Center. He also is a lead consultant to the United Nations Development Programs on the domestication of SDGs. Dr. Jelili also serves on several other boards of different organizations. The goal of their organization is to really serve the Muslim Ummah and humanity at large, to help contribute to the development and advancement of humanity through education by drawing on inspirations of the revelation of the Quran and Sunnah. Welcome, Dr. Jelili. We hope that you're able to share with us some of your work. It sounds like you have a grand master plan to solve any type of messy educational problem. So we look forward to learning about your organization and the type of work that you do. Today's focus will be on, I'm hoping you'll give us a wide range of the services that you provide, but with a focus on whole school sustainability and the ethical frameworks for using artificial intelligence. Welcome, and it's great to have you with us.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I really want to thank the leadership of GAIS for giving AFERDEC the opportunity to spotlight some of the services that we are offering for Islamic schools across the world to help assist them in achieving their educational goals. As introduced, my name is Jelili Adebiyi, the Associate Director of AFERDEC. So my presentation is going to follow this outline. I'm going to start with a little brief introduction of myself and AFERDEC. Following that, I'm going to do a preface of some of the major great challenges facing Islamic schools across the world, including in North America. And following that, I'll pivot to the services that AFERDEC is providing to assist us to solve some of these problems. And following that, we are going to pivot to the question and answer segment. As rightly mentioned, my name is Jelili Adebiyi, the Associate Director of AFERDEC. AFERDEC is an education support service provider with specialization in the areas revolving around educational design, evaluation, and research services. So wherever you're interested in addressing in any of these three broad areas, AFERDEC specializes in providing services that meets the specificity of the needs of our clients, including Muslims and non-Muslims. We are located in Michigan, and we can be found through our website, www.afedec.com. If you're also interested in emailing us, you could send us an email at hello@afedec.com. And we can also be communicated to via 517-515-5681. Our mission at AFERDEC is to support the creation of a balanced society and the nurturing of functional educators, outstanding students, problem solvers, thought leaders, and responsible citizenry, which we believe are the mission of most of the Islamic schools we have across the world. At AFERDEC, we set to achieve these goals by offering client-tailored and policy-oriented services in education design, research, and evaluation by collaborating and consulting with schools, communities, policymakers, government, and non-governmental establishments. Today, our presentation is going to be focusing on three of our major core services, and these are whole school sustainability planning and strategic road mapping. Second, ethical framework for artificial intelligence and education technology generally. And finally, reimagining, revisioning, and remissioning of Islamic schools. And before we dive into the nitty-gritty of the services of these three core services and the alignment with some of the great challenges facing Islamic school, it is imperative that we first discuss briefly some of these major challenges, which you all may want to agree with me are either universal or contextually relevant to the situation in different Muslim countries. One of the major challenges that we found in scholarship, and we are citing scholarship literature because our understanding at AFERDEC is that whatever we want to do as a service provider must be data driven. So our understanding of the problem is informed by system data that derive from what's been published and our extensive conversation with stakeholders across different educational ecosystem within the principles of Islamic schools across the world. One of the major universal problems we found that is consistent across board is the challenge of perception of Islamic school. And this relates to the perception about the ability of Islamic schools, either elementary school or high school, to offer top-notch education to many in the Muslim community. They believe that Islamic schools are not good enough to offer top-notch education. And that's something that many schools that are Islamic have had to be dealing with, including in places like Malaysia. We also notice the problem of conflictual expectations, meaning that the expectations of the parent, the expectations of community member are at variance with the expectation of the kind of education that Islamic schools set out to offer. And this leads to another interesting problem, and that is the problem of distrust that looms large among all the stakeholders within the Islamic school ecosystem in different parts of the Muslim world. Another problem we also figure out is the challenge of keeping the mission that underpin the establishment of Islamic school alive. And some of the times, the problem appears in the form of the mission and the vision not being clear to all the stakeholders. That is, teachers in the school, sometimes publications, literature have shown us that sometimes the teachers that work in Islamic school, they do not have a crystal clear understanding of what the vision and the mission of the schools are. And more often than not, the parents are often at a loss regarding what the mission and the vision have. And there's also the problem of defining expectation, look at from the perspective of the mission of Islamic schools in different parts of the world. And there's also evidence suggesting that there's sometimes a mismatch between the mission of the school and what the school is actually doing, meaning that what the school is doing sometimes may be at variance with the avowed mission that the school expects to be known with. And finally, we also realize the issue of unrealistic mission. And this begs the conversation about the thought process that led to the formation of the mission ab initio at the formative stage of some of these Islamic schools. And that is why it is important that some of these issues be addressed in order for the mission to be kept alive. Because if a school develops an unrealistic mission, the implication is that such a school is going to struggle enormously to keep their mission alive. So this is another challenge that we also found based on our extended conversation with stakeholders, and extended review of existing literature on the subject matter. Another more interesting problem is the problem of financial instability, and this borders on the fact that quality education is expensive to provide. And when schools are not financially stable, sustainable, the implication is that something is going to be compromised. And more often than not, quality takes the hit. And that possibly explains why parents are worried about the quality of education provided by Islamic school. The other one is the issue of high expectation but low funding. There is this high expectation on the side of those that fund this Islamic school, and there is high expectation from the side of community members. There is high expectation from parents and their children attending this Islamic school. However, the funding, there's always a mismatch between the expectation level and the amount of funding that is available. And finally, because many of the Islamic schools across the world, they depend on donors, community funding, endowment, and worldview. And we notice that apathy set in because more often than not, the same set of donors will be responsible for funding masajid, for funding Islamic community activity. And as a result, when it comes to providing continuous funding for Islamic school, they easily get drained out. And all of these and other factors contribute to the ecology, typology of financial instability that typifies most Islamic schools across the world. Another interesting problem is the issue of leadership. Especially, we noted the issue of limited and dwindling quality leadership pool. And that raises a fundamental sustainability issue because for any Islamic school to live their mission and to be sustainable, they need top-notch quality leadership in good numbers. However, with most Islamic schools across the world, we notice the crisis of limited and dwindling quality leadership pool. The other part of this crisis of leadership is high turnover of quality and seasoned administrator. Majority of them, because they are the Islamic schools that are available, majority of them are not able to pay them good salary and benefit. The situation that arises is that after spending some time in an Islamic school, they often would relocate to another school where they can attract better salary and benefit. And those that choose to work behind as teachers, as administrators, more often than not, they have had to deal with a lot of workload that is unusual. And obviously, there's a problem of uncertainty and background deficiency, especially as it applies to the teachers working in Islamic school. Because majority of them, they went to the traditional Western type educational system. They went through traditional Western type educational system, which may not be sufficient for them to be teachers in Islamic school, particularly when we look at it from the perspective that we're trying to draw inferences, insight from the Quran and the Sunnah in order to create an integrated educational offering. So the background deficiency in Islamic sciences is also one of the major issues that feed into the leadership challenges facing Islamic school. We further observe a mismatch between teachers' education and the mission that many of the Islamic schools set out to achieve. Another layer to the challenges facing Islamic school worldwide is the dearth of quality teachers. And this arises from the fact that private schools and public schools across the world, they are competing for the few available quality teachers. And what that means is that if you have the money, the financial war chest, you may stand in a better situation to attract and employ quality teachers. And as we mentioned previously, many of the Islamic schools are struggling financially. So with that meaning that they are not in a good situation to compete with other private schools and public schools who's gotten the financial capability to employ high quality teachers. The other one is the issue of supply-demand gaps. When we look at the amount of Islamic school and the numbers over the years, the numbers in most cases, especially in the global south, have been increasing. However, when you look at the corresponding growth in the number of teachers that have the required background, required education to teach in an Islamic school, we found a shortfall, meaning that as the number of Islamic schools continue to grow, the number of qualified teachers with the right education is not matching up with the growth level of the number of Islamic schools. And this leads to the crisis of supply-demand gaps that many Islamic schools are facing. And obviously, if you need to keep quality teachers, you must offer them quality compensation, which most Islamic schools are not able to offer as a result of their financial challenges. There are also curriculum issues related to standard subject curriculum, which more often than not, most Islamic schools are likely to borrow from public schools. So meaning that the way they are going to teach, they teach standard subject curriculum are not necessarily different from the way the standard subject curriculum are taught in public school. And this raises a fundamental issue, given the fact that when you look at the standard subject curriculum offered in most public schools, the philosophical foundation is secularism. For example, if you want to talk about the water cycle, there's no way they're going to talk about God in that water cycle, because science as it is practiced in public school does not recognize a place for divinity, for God in the schemes of things. So that means that if water cycle is going to be taught in an Islamic school, there must be the recognition, acknowledgement, embeddedment of God into the scheme of things. And that is likely not to be the case. So when we borrow curriculum from public schools, we are likely to face this challenge. And when it's one of the issues agitating many of the administrators that we have spoken for, so that we have engaged with from different countries across the world. The other issue is that Islamic studies curriculums that are also available in many of the Islamic schools around are ill-equipped to build Islamic personality suited to place. And this is a very interesting thing. Now that even within the field of fiqh, we have what they call the minority fiqh, we have what they call the majority fiqh. For example, in countries like the United States, where AFERDEC is situated, the Muslims are minority in this place. And what that means is that our Islamic schools must be able to raise Muslim, Islamic Quranic personalities that can rise up to the challenges of living in the United States of America. Our findings suggest that many of the Islamic studies curriculum course offerings that are offered are ill-equipped to build, to help foster, engineer the production of such Islamic personality. And finally, there is a problem that is common across board that has to do with either lack of or purely envisioned roadmap through which Islamic schools could achieve their noble objective. When we look at the totality of the challenges that I've explained and the implications of these challenges, one of the things that is evident is that the great challenges facing Islamic school, they are multifaceted in the sense that there are multiple dimensions of the problem. I will further recognize, based on our relationship, our conversation with administrators from across the world, and based on evidence that is available in the literature, that the problem are highly contextual, meaning that the magnitude and the extent of the great problem and the various ways of manifestation might vary from one Islamic school to another Islamic school. When we look at both of these combined together, that is the multifaceted nature of the problem and the highly contextual nature of the problem, the implication is that there is a need for most Islamic schools to have what we call a whole school sustainability planning. One, there is a leadership dimension to the problem. There's a problem of struggling to live the missions of Islamic school. There's a problem of lack of quality administrator. There's a problem of lack of quality teachers. And there are other component pieces of the problem that clearly establishes that most Islamic schools are facing a sustainability problem. And part of that sustainability problem requires, when you look at the nature of the sustainability problem, it requires that we reimagine and re-envision Islamic school by drawing on the concept of Islam and Tashdid. And the other implication of this is that there is a need for strategic road mapping, road mapping of existing Islamic school, and to fund new Islamic school on a well thought out roadmap that is funded on the principle of old school sustainability, in the sense that an all-encompassing sustainability that talks to the issue of finances, that talks to the issue of infrastructure, and etc. and etc. And the other thing that the nature of the problem requires is innovative response to the problem, more so that education is moving to the age of artificial intelligence, where everything that is known, that is considered as a given, is going to be challenged. And this underpins why AFERDEC is focusing on 3 spotlighted core services in this presentation today. And the first is the service that revolves around working with schools across the world to establish, to support them to design and implement old school sustainability plan and strategic roadmap. We're also going to be talking about the framework that we are working on that schools, administrators, teachers, and students in Islamic school can use to guide the use of artificial intelligence and other forms of education technology. And finally, we are going to be talking about services pertaining to reimagining, re-envisioning, and remissioning of Islamic school. Now, let's get into the specifics of what we mean by whole school sustainability planning and strategic road mapping. In this arena, the focus of AFERDEC is to work with schools, Islamic schools, in designing and implementing old school sustainability framework and plans. And here, our goal is not to develop a universal plan. And the reason is very simple. No two contexts is the same. Even within an Islamic school, no two classes could be the same. The nature of the students' challenges in a particular class might not necessarily be the same as the nature of the challenges the students are going to be facing in another class within an Islamic school. And evidence has suggested clearly that no two schools could be facing the same problem, even when the problems appear to be the same. When the problems appear to be similar, similarity does not imply sameness. And that is why in working with schools to develop old school sustainability plan and strategic roadmap, AFERDEC works with individual schools to understand what their problems are and work with them to design and develop a whole school sustainability plan that will keep them regenerative and sustained to the end of time, inshallah. Our whole school sustainability planning and strategic road mapping revolves around a number of elements. However, we are going to be focusing on 3 planning elements for the purposes of this conversation, of this presentation. The first part is the institutional culture. The second is physical place. And the third is educational program. In the aspect of educational program, we go about working with our client to develop a whole school sustainability plan and strategic roadmap that recognizes a need to connect the educational program piece of the plan to dean and place. And We further recognize that the educational element of the plan should be too student-centered and powered, because the goal of establishing an Islamic school is to serve the needs of the student, to help meet the needs of the student. And that is why the way we go about designing the strategic roadmap is pivoted around coming up with plans that empower students to take ownership of their learning process. Not just ownership, to also drive it innovatively in a way that whatever they learn is going to become a lifelong part of their intellectuality. And the kinds of education we offer is meditative, and it also seeks to help address the issue of leadership quality by helping to engineer and sustain the continued production of charismatic leadership at all interfaces of the educational system in Islamic school. The other piece is the institutional culture as one of the principles in the whole school sustainability planning and strategic road mapping that will support school to build that will support Islamic schools to build. And in this area, some of the major things that form the foundational basis of fleshing this component piece of the plan is embeddedness in Quran and Sunnah. So meaning that the entire institutional culture within the plan is going to be crested on the principles that are derived from the Quran and the Sunnah. And in that way, the issue of expectation gap between what the community is expecting in terms of the Islamic outlook of the school and their product could be easily addressed. And obviously, the institutional culture, as it is in our planning process, also recognizes the need for the mission and the vision to be properly aligned. And that is in response to one of the challenges that were presented about at the beginning of today's talk. And finally, the institutional culture is pivoted, structured around the concept of integrated learning. Today, when you go to many Islamic schools, integrated science is going to be taught using the language of secularism in most cases. Mathematics, the same way. English, the same way. Physics, the same way. Chemistry, biology. And when it's time to teach Islamic studies, Quran, Hadith, and what have you, they use the language of the Sunnah, the language of the Deen. In our case, what we're trying to achieve is not to make students to see each of these different learning as categories of their own. And that is why we work with our client to create an integrated learning culture that helps create an eclectic synthesis of the Deen and what is known of the standard subject that is offered in other spaces. And finally, the other part of the plans that we help our client, and the other component piece of the plans we help our client to develop is physical place. And here we emphasize paying attention to creating a physical space that is comforting, that supports meditative learning, that fosters engagement, and support and reinforce active learning. And another core emphasis is on creating a healthy and safe space, which is an embodiment of education as it is within the precinct of Islamic educational systems since the beginning of time. And that is that on the part of the services that we provide, focusing on old school sustainability planning and strategic road mapping. The other service I'm going to be talking about today is the development of ethical framework for the use of artificial intelligence and other educational technology. Here we recognize that AI has come to stay and is going to be creating a lot of disruption, especially in educational spaces, Islamic educational learning spaces inclusive. And we further recognize that AI has the possibility to be an enhancer. It could enhance learning. And at the same time, there are numerous opportunities for the use of AI in educational spaces to impair learning and inhibit creativity. For example, studies have shown that with the use of AI, people could benefit individually, and at the same time, it could make the group to be less creative, which is counterintuitive and is not what Islamic educational providers want to do. We want education to benefit people creatively, individually, and at the same time for the group, whereas the Ummah and humanity to be equally well benefited by such an education. We also note, based on the existing findings from scholarship, that AI has demonstrated ability to decrease diversity and creativity in the population. And it has a tendency for existing work to be regurgitated without likely to stifle the ability to innovate for the continued development of humanity. And this particular slide gives us a panoramic overview of some of the universe of the positive impact that may emanate from the reliance or the use of AI in educational spaces, as well as the potential negative impact. One of the positive impacts is that it gives us the opportunity to create differentiated or personalized learning. And such learning can take place around the clock because AI is always accessible to the extent you have access to the internet, so you can use it at any time of the day to support your learning process. And obviously, without any doubt, AI creates an atmosphere for interactive learning. However, the interaction is taking place between human being and a computer interface, and there's a likelihood that AI might assist in aiding the memory of its users. Obviously, it has a lot of negative impact. One is addiction to the use of AI. The second is that it could impede the progress of students in building and reinforcing their critical thinking capability. Because what AI does is that it takes over the process of thinking critically. So it is AI that thinks critically, and in most cases, not necessarily the users of AI, which is not what Islamic schools love to do. There are concerns, grave concerns, about the likelihood of artificial intelligence platforms regurgitating, producing inaccurate information. And for those that are not able to tease what is accurate, what is inaccurate, they may be moving around and using inaccurate information to motivate whatever problem they're interested in addressing. We also believe that studies have also shown that AI is likely, most likely, engender the area of superficiality in learning, meaning that as a result of dependence on the use of artificial intelligence in learning, people will assume they know, but in the real sense, they got no good knowledge of what they're talking about. And studies have equally shown that with expected increase in the use of artificial intelligence in educational spaces, there's a likelihood for a decrease in human interaction. And finally, is the big question of demotivation. It can demotivate people's requirements to put effort into their learning process in order for them to be at the top of their team, because they just have this one button type of platform. Throw in the prompt and you get your response immediately, effortlessly. That is likely to create demotivation of investing more time, brain power into a learning process. And these are issues, outcomes that Islamic schools won't like to be associated with. And that is why it is imperative that we recognize one, that if AI can impart critical thinking, if AI can reduce human interaction and cause addiction, if AI can foster superficiality learning, if it could cause demotivation and diminish memory capability, then there's a need for us to have an ethical and decision framework for the use of AI within Islamic schools. And it's not just in Islamic schools, because now the same issue is being raised in non-Islamic school. And what this means is that for us to address this potential concern that AI is going to be generating, these challenges that are associated with the use of AI in educational spaces. As Islamic schools, we need ethic, we need to operate on the perspective that ethics should inform the use, the design, and the use of innovation. And in this case, AI being the innovation under consideration. Not only that, we further recognize that when we use ethics to inform the design and use of AI as an educational innovation, the innovation itself is going to generate a feedback that we are going to use to rethink the ethical basis of our relationship and use of artificial intelligence tools. The implication of this is that we need to design ethics-based frameworks and decision trees for AI uses within Islamic educational ecosystem that will help meet the need of administrators, teachers, students, and other educational stakeholders. And AFERDEC is offering a service in this regard. Specifically, AFERDEC has been working with a range of stakeholders to develop an ethics-based framework and decision tree that schools, Islamic schools, students, teachers, administrators, and parents can use to make a decision about the ethical and appropriate uses of AI. And this includes the framework and assist them to decide when and how to use AI, how to incorporate AI into their school and work as teachers, as administrators, as students. And the framework we're talking about and decision trees would assist teachers and other stakeholders to determine whether their students can use AI. Because study is are beginning to show us that not all students can use AI to their benefit. For some, it's not going to assist them to progress with their education. It could further retard their intellectual development. And that is why we need an ethical-based framework that we can use to make this guided and informed decision. And the other thing that the framework and decision tree that AFERDEC is seeking to offer Islamic school will assist us to do is to help make effective and responsible implementation of artificial intelligence. And this is where I'm going to stop now in order to entertain your questions, your comments. I thank you for the opportunity to be one of the speakers in this Spotlight series of GAIS. Thank you.
Jazakallah khair, Dr. Jelili. Thank you so much for going through several really critical points for our Islamic schools. The first, I want to just briefly summarize the challenges faced by Islamic schools that you listed. So as a reminder for our audience, number one was the misconception about the quality of Islamic schools. The second was the clarity of the mission, understanding what it is and implementing it. The third was funding, sustainable funding. The fourth was the lack of quality leadership capacity. The fifth was the lack of teaching staff resources who were qualified to teach in Islamic schools. One reason, there were several reasons. One is because most are educated in the Western systems and may not have the background for integrating Islamic sciences. But the other is also attracting quality staff because of the lack of funding. The sixth was the curriculum, and a curriculum that serves the needs of Islamic schools. Those were the curriculum, and then not having a clear roadmap of where the school is headed. And this is where your organization comes in. I don't know if there's a feedback from your mic. Can you mute yourself, Dr. Jelili, for a second?
Oh, okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
The Your response would be to provide a whole school sustainability plan, which includes impact on institutional culture, the physical space and educational programs. I thought it was interesting that you mentioned physical space here. That's something that we don't often see when we're looking at a whole school sustainability planning. The type of space and how it's used. So I'm going to just ask you a couple of questions about this, and then we'll move to the topic of artificial intelligence and ethical framework. So in your experience with working with Islamic schools in different parts of the world, in different parts of North America, does this process, what is it that you first do with a school? What's your first step? You're muted, brother Dr. Jelili.
Appreciate it. As it is with any planning process, the first thing we do is to have to collect data. It's the data gathering process. A part of the data gathering process involves mapping the stakeholders within a specific Islamic school ecosystem. And this usually includes the school administrators. And sometimes the school administrators are the founders of the schools, the people that funded the school in the first instance. And this also includes the people that are funding the school. The teachers are also part of the set of people in our universe of school stakeholders, the students, the parents, and the guardians, or even the communities, that is the Islamic communities within the embedding of that particular Islamic school. They are also part of the stakeholder. And that is usually the first step, the mapping of the stakeholders. And here we apply the concept of system thinking. Because traditionally, when people think about developing a plan for an Islamic school, sustainability plan, they define the system as a school itself. We are deviating from this norm. And the reason is because there are things external to the school that could affect the school itself. And that is why we have an extended framing of the concept of stakeholders when we map the stakeholder for a particular Islamic school. So we use system thinking to extensively map who the stakeholders are, stakeholders that are directly and indirectly connected to the school. And the stakeholders are also the government as well. We include the government and stakeholders because government policies could affect Islamic school. The environment within which Islamic schools are located are also part of the stakeholders. For example, for those of us in North America, if our environment is hostile, that could affect the performance of Islamic school. And that is why including them, not necessarily from the perspective of talking to the hostile community members, but we recognize that they are a part of that system. So we look at them into the mapping of the stakeholders. So after the stakeholders are mapped together with the school, the next thing is to design collaboratively with the school the process of getting information. Every single planning that is set up to be effective and productive must be data-driven. So we have elaborate means of collecting data, qualitative data and quantitative data through a collaborative, engaging and stimulating workshop process. We use state-of-the-art approaches to facilitate a workshop. One of them is backcasting. And backcasting is being used by the leading companies, corporations to find in the world, to help design a strategic roadmap for their continued competition. We are using this system-aware tools to motivate the process of collecting data. And after the data is collected, because one of the things we do is to build the capacity for the schools that we provide service for to be able to do the same thing without us. Our philosophy is not to foster dependency. Our philosophy is to offer a service and don't miss out the capability to do the same thing without us. And we are doing that because that is the Islamic philosophy that underpins service provision and the business activities of AFERDEC. So work with them to analyze the data, make sense of the data, and write up the plan itself. And after that, you go through stages of presenting the plans to different stakeholders and eventually come up with a product that every single stakeholder is going to understand every single word in that plan. And that is why our plan is something that stakeholders are able to implement. Because we work with them to develop the plans, to analyze the data, motivating the plans, and even in writing them the elements of the plan. I hope this addresses your question.
Yeah. Yes, it does. That also explains why you focus on context driven services, right? Because you've stated that each community has its own unique needs, and so when you begin with just collecting data from all stakeholders, internal and external, you're looking at the ecosystem. Where does this school exist? What's happening inside the school, what's happening around the school, what's happening that's impacting the school. And that's a data-driven process. And then you present that to the community and you work together to come up with a plan, which I love the part about that every stakeholder understands, because often we come up with these written documents and these plans where people don't really understand what they say. They're way above everyone's head, and they don't sound practical. And I think what is unique about what your services are is that, one, it is very context driven and it is done in a collaborative manner, and then the solutions you come up with are with the stakeholders. It's not something you're going to hand them and say, here, do this, right? So that's my understanding. Yes, that's an excellent response to the question. It's very clear. And as a researcher myself, who believes in mixed methods more than anything, the qualitative and quantitative data that you gather is critical to finding the right solutions.
Yeah,
So,
and the other thing I would like to mention is this. So there are some elements of modeling that feeds into the development of a plan. Because with modeling, we can come up with scenarios.
mhm,
Science knowledge has advanced to the stage that when you come up with a plan, you can build scenarios around the plan,
yes,
run your scenarios through models, and know what the likely outcome could be. And that will give us the opportunity of selecting the best scenario. And that will also give us the opportunity to have plans that are anticipatory. Because one of the challenges we notice with Muslim schools, Islamic schools, it's only when the problems come that they start running after the problems. But when you do scenario-based visioning and planning, one of the things it does for you is that it is anticipatory. That if this happens, this is going to be our response. If this happens, this is going to be our response. If this happens, so you are prepared to have that adaptive capability. That adaptive capability to respond to issue is an intricate and inherent part of the kinds of plan that we support our client to develop and implement. I just want to
mashallah.
mention.
That's amazing. That's also a critical point, and it is very much aligned with Islamic principles. We're not a reactive people of faith. We are a proactive, right, and preventative. We set up the guidelines and the parameters to try to prevent problems or to prepare for them rather than just to respond. And that is one of the major issues with us as Muslims, is that we tend to be more responsive and reactive than we are prepared. And this is having models and scenarios is critical for being better prepared. I want to shift really quickly. Jazakallah khair again. You have your wealth of knowledge. We could probably spend hours discussing all the ideas that you have in your head and that your organization provides. I want to switch very quickly to artificial intelligence. And again, with this, as Islamic schools, even as educators in general, I think the general population has been reactive. We weren't prepared. It's been coming. It's been around for quite a while. It's now in the hands of students and teachers and the common people. So now we're trying to figure out what is AI. Although it's been around for decades and been used in many fields. You talked about the positive and negative impacts, and there's positive uses. There are ways to use it positively, but and what you would provide is a decision tree, which I thought was interesting, and I thought maybe if you could elaborate on that. You mentioned that it would help uh, any stakeholder make a decision about whether there should how when and how to use AI. Can you talk a little bit about the decision tree?
Thank you so much. So we are not calling it the regular decision tree. We call it the ethics-based framework and decision tree.
Okay.
And the reason is because the foundation of everything we do in Islam is ethics. We don't move from innovation to ethics. In the case of AI, it came actually from the industry. And when you look at the industry, they operate on the principle of profit maximization.
Mm.
There are three main variables in this equation. On the extreme right-hand side, you have profit maximization. On the extreme right-hand side, left-hand side, you have profit maximization. And then you now have the independent variables, the IVs. You have the cost and revenue. For industry, they got to maximize their revenue and they got to reduce their cost of production. And that is how they actually maximize profit. And one of the things that they want to reduce is the amount of time that people spend performing a particular task. Not only that, they want to reduce that time and increase the amount of work that people we get done. And that
Mm.
was why they felt, oh, they needed a platform, and they introduced this platform. Whether this platform is going to be beneficial or not beneficial to people is not their concern. Their main concern is the money that they want to maximize. So they are not coming from the perspective of ethics. So as Muslims, we are critical thinkers and users of such platforms. It's around, we are not going to deny that it's not going to be useful, but we further recognize that it may have a lot of harmful implication for all stakeholders. And that is why the first thing we did at AFERDEC was to go back to Islamic episteme, the Quran and the Sunnah, the ontological approach of looking at issues such as this. And we now recognize that before we start designing and using this in Islamic educational spaces, we need to come up with an ethical framework for use. In that way, the ethics guides the development of the tool and how we are going to be using the tool. So what we're going to do with this, what is happening within this tree list is we have ethical principles that have been distilled and they are still being distilled. Some of them have been distilled. We are still in the process of distilling them. So it's an ongoing process, those ethical principles. So the ethical principles are forming the foundation of the decision tree. For example, if a student wants to use this tree, the decision tree will guide the student whether it makes sense, whether it's going to be beneficial for the student to use it for a particular purpose or not. So there will be series of interaction. What are you using it for? What is your current level of understanding? Series of questions. There's a massive algorithm at the back end of the decision tree that eventually will tell that particular student, if you use AI for this purpose, these are going to be the likely consequences. So at the
Mm.
end of the day, the student will be able to make an informed decision whether to go with something that is likely to cause more harm or to go with something that is likely to cause no harm. And that is what we are actually producing. So it's going to take the form of an app. The decision tree is going to take the form of an app that teachers can download, that students can download, that parents can download, and that you can use to make a decision about responsible and ethical use of artificial intelligence.
Wow. Okay. So is the app is coming, or is that in the works?
It's in the works. Yeah.
All right.
yeah,
Inshallah.
yeah, it's in the works, and we are working with Islamic schools to develop this, and we are speaking with shuyukhs and Islamic educational experts to develop this app, and I mean, we are very happy about it, the progress we are making, and we are very glad that we are going to be producing unique products for the use of Muslims across the world, even non-Muslims. They will find
Yes.
this helpful. I have some Christian friends who are agitated about the fact that the use of artificial intelligence will cause cognitive dissonance
Yes.
and struggles in educational learning spaces. So there are non-Muslims that are also agitated about this. And that's why we keep saying at AFEDEC, whatever product a Muslim offers in the market is for the benefit of humanity, not
Yes.
just for the benefit of Muslims.
MashaAllah. That's a beautiful philosophy to live by. And so ultimately, your message is that ethics should guide the use of the tool. And what you're proposing is an ethical framework that will help anyone, whether they're Muslim or not Muslim, whether they're a student or an educator or in whatever industry, it will help them guide whether they should be using it and how it should be used. Sounds like we look forward to hearing about the app and maybe testing it out, inshallah. I want to thank you today. You've given us so much to think about, mashallah. Your AFERDEC offers a slew of services, but I think the thing that is really unique about it is that it's holistic. The services are not just tackling one aspect of an issue, because schools and institutions generally have whole system problems, and the systems thinking is a great way to tackle it. Jazakallah khair for being with us today and sharing the details about your organization and what's coming up, inshallah, with the app for AI decision tree. We look forward to hearing more about your success, inshallah. May Allah continue to give you tawfiq and guide you to help our educational institutions worldwide. Jazakallah khair, Dr. Jelili, for joining us today, and all of you. You for joining us on this 11th episode of Spotlight, and we will see you next time, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.